Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. I am so excited to learn from today's guest. He's a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and one of the best connectors of people I know. He started his first business when he was 23 and has started multiple successful businesses since then. He's invested in over 40 early stage companies, many names that you would recognize. His company has placed thousands of people in leadership roles at over 1,000 companies since they started. He's the co-founder and CEO of Hunt Club, the leading technology-enabled search firm in the world. Nick Cromydas, welcome to the show.
David, thank you for having me. God, I'm gonna have my wife listen to that opener after this, and I think she'll be happy. But I really appreciate it. You've been a great friend for so long, and we loved working with you in the Better Go Out days, and I'm just so excited to be a part of this.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing this. I've really been excited for this. So the way we start out every podcast, every episode is with this question: what's one thing you've done at Hunt Club, big or small, that had the biggest impact and you will absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
Yeah, I think for us, it would probably be our all hands format. And so since the early days, even when we were 3 or 4 people, we would go on a monthly basis where you spend an hour as a company and a team and really just look and reflect on everything that we did that month, how we're tracking towards performance, have sort of specific curated discussions around what is the most impactful thing for the business and how those projects going. And of course, it's changed as we've grown from 5 people to 50 people to 200 people. But it's been a huge part about sort of our identity and maintaining culture and making sure we're communicating the right way and everyone's informed in how we're doing. And so I think we'll take that with us. Anytime I start something else, a new business ever again, or in the future, like something that we always kind of have a good heartbeat and rhythm on.
So how often, what's the cadence of those meetings?
Yeah, we do them monthly. We are very transparent. So we show our financials to the entire company and talk about performance against plan. We review all of our different metrics that we're pursuing as business and different teams. And if we think we're sort of red, yellow, green against those objectives and goals. And then we really break it down into a wide variety of other topics. And I think the really cool thing that we do in every single all hands from the early days is actually shout outs. You got to come to one a couple months ago, so you got to see this, but sometimes we get like 6 slides worth of people in the company just celebrating each other, thanking them for, job well done, or helping them with a certain area of the business, or performing really well for our customers, or launching a great piece of technology. And so monthly, basically, we go into this really cool cadence where we're really, our entire company is shouting each other out. And I think that built a really strong culture for the business. So it's been a huge part, I think, of the HC culture, and something I'll try and take everywhere.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I was lucky to be there for an all hands, and it was amazing actually to watch. One of the things that I caught on to, or that I thought was really interesting, is how many voices, how many different people spoke. How do you choose who speaks? Is it always different people? Because that to me was really interesting. I think I heard 6, 7 people maybe, in the course of one all hands, which is a lot.
Yeah. I made the mistake that, or maybe not the mistake, but I think every company sort of does in the early days where all hands, it's usually just one voice and it's mine. And you get to a point where I think that works well in the early days of the business, just because, obviously you generally, if a founding CEO is starting a company and they've got this idea of what the vision should be, and communicating that vision really specifically, directly, is hard when it hasn't manifested itself into reality yet. So it's hard to really be inclusive of tons of different voices, all communicating sort of this nebulous vision. But once you get to significant sort of scale or moderate scale, I started pulling back. And I just think when the rest of the company shares what they're working on or drives some of the cultural elements of the business, my job is maybe to hit 5 minutes of the presentation on the biggest thing that we're working on, but really let the rest of the company kind of share their perspective. And we found that works really well for a lot of different reasons in scaling the company.
I mean, you spoke the least actually,
Yeah.
in that all hands. Honestly, it was really cool. The other thing that I noticed is I saw a lot of people asking questions, even some challenging questions,
Yeah.
in the open. I mean, there was no, how do you, I don't know how to, how do you foster that? How does that work? Because that's another thing, at least for me, that I think it's hard to create that environment, where people can do that. Is that a intentional thing from the beginning? Did you, or is that something that has kind of evolved over time?
Both. So one of our values is we ask why. And
Mm.
so one of the things that I find builds a great culture is, you know, really making sure that you create an environment where people feel comfortable asking questions when they don't quite know the answer or if they're curious about something. And I think too often, and I've been a part of these in different corporate cultures, asking questions or narrowing the gap on knowledge is actually seen as a weakness and or you not knowing your job or what you're supposed to be doing. And even with the best communicators in the world, which I'm far from even close, but even like the best communicators in the world, if you have an audience of 100 people, you may only really be able to engage and get through to 70, 80% of them, right? So they're distracted on their phones. They're thinking about something that happened before they walked into the meeting. And so it's kind of our take that if you don't really build a culture where people are comfortable asking a really hard or direct question or asking something that they don't know, it's actually impossible to actually close the gap
Mm.
on what you're trying to build together. And so we want to create an environment where people really know the good and the bad. They really know what we're marching towards, and we find that it's more effective than sort of guardrailing or gaining information in different ways. And especially you think about like Better Cloud and all the businesses you built over the years, like to win, you really need to be in it as a team, the good and the bad. And I think that's also something I always valued from our relationship is you never sugarcoated a thing. You were direct about exactly what you wanted. You're direct about what the business needs, and you're open to different ideas. But I think that level of directness is what creates a great culture. And I think if you're transparent, you train people to not just get obsessed with the good news, but
Mm.
also working together to fix the tough moments and the problems as well. And it's something that's important to us.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've said this a lot to people, especially first time founders, is I feel like there's so much pressure on your shoulders when you're the one who has all the information and you're the one making all the decisions. And in a almost, you could argue, selfish way, telling everyone else about the challenges and telling everyone else about the things that need to get improved. I think it helps you, and a lot of times someone has the answer actually that's at the company, and it's, but if they don't know that there's a problem, they can't tell you, their ideas for how to fix it. So I love that. I think the all hands is really important. I think it's an important part of the operating rhythm, the breathing apparatus of the company. An important question. This is a very tactical question, but it's
Yeah.
who manages that like who actually puts that all hands together every week. I'm sorry, every month, because that is quite a bit of work. Who owns that?
Yeah, in the early days, it was all my co-founder, Sami and I, sort of organizing the information, distilling it into different decks and slides, and then putting it on a monthly basis. Now we've actually built a pretty good infrastructure where, 3 to call it 6 days before the actual all hands, we'll almost create a bit of a run a show, and as a leadership team, we'll talk about all the different themes that we think are the most important. And so we always have about 50% of the content that's consistent across every single all hands. So that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty easily pullable and structured. The next 50% usually isn't. And so what we'll do is we'll sort of crowdsource questions from the team that they think are things that we need to close the gap on. And then what we'll do next is as a leadership team discuss how we're going to spend, the 50% of the time in the unstructured sort of content or templatized version. And then once we align on that, then it's really responsible for whatever leader is up for sharing content. So I think when you joined, there was a big section around our expert network and how that powers search and the progress and some of the projects that we're doing. So we had one of our leaders, Ashley, who drives that really present. And so we'll have basically our leaders crowdsource ideas. We'll, as a leadership team, align in what we want to present. once we have that, leaders are responsible for creating their own slides in the deck. And then my EA, who's wonderful, will actually put it all together, and then we go.
Got
So
it.
that's how we do it.
Got it. Yep. I think that's where a lot of people lose momentum, in my opinion, on all hands is it gets too hard to produce, and there's no, and I think you got to get into that rhythm, and once you do though, it's yeah, super powerful. Okay, so listen, I mean, in all the years I've known you, you are the expert in hiring. So I think I'd like to spend some time in the hiring area. Uh, let me just start. When you are looking to hire someone for Hunt Club specifically, I know you work with thousands of companies, but for Hunt Club specifically, what is the number one attribute that you look for?
Yeah, there are two specifically that I look for in every single person at the company. So the first is curiosity. And so do they ask tons of questions? Do they lead with curiosity and thoughtfulness, or do they jump into the solution? And we find that especially in an industry where most of the archetypes of people that work in search or executive search don't come from a solutions oriented background. They're not technologists. They're not really trying to build this hybrid model like we've created. We need people that are quite curious to find ways to understand the problem. And so we really look for that in most of the talent that we hire. The other thing that we look for is passion. And I've always found this just in life that the most passionate people are the ones that can actually drive impact in some form or fashion. And passion doesn't necessarily actually have to be for Hunt Club in the interview. Like, I don't need somebody that comes in the door and says, "This is the best business ever. I've watched every single one of your videos and podcasts. I've talked to some of your customers and really just believe in what you're doing. And I've like studied the space." That actually isn't the most important thing. And I think a lot of CEOs do a poor job of creating a distinction between like, is this a passionate person versus are they passionate for our business? What I found is if someone has had passion in their life at some point, whether it was they're a world-class pianist or a great dancer or a star athlete or, crushed the debate team in high school years ago or something, right? Just some sort of spark. You as a leader, as a manager, can take that as your job to try and figure out what it is that can bring them to the next level and recreate that passion that they once had for something else into the business. And that's something that we look for, right? Because when you're working in client service, when you're working in a volatile or high growth environment in a startup, like those who really care about what they're doing and are passionate about it are the ones that can really make a difference in the experience they provide and ultimately driving an outcome. So curiosity and passion are like my big ones.
Do you have a way of asking a question around those two? The passion one specifically, I'm curious, like how do you pull that out of someone or see if they have that passion? Because I like that a lot. That like that, I don't think I've ever verbalized it that way, but I agree with you that the people who have passion for something, like, and deep down inside of them, like that's someone you want on your team. But how do you suss that out?
And most humans like are passionate about something. You just for a startup or a growth stage company, I feel like if they've had it once before, you just need to understand that how to stir it to create excitement and joy and building. And so for us or for me, what I love to do on that end is actually just do a bit of a life walk. And I'm not sure if you've ever done that like methodology with other
No.
CEOs, but spend maybe 30 minutes of the interview understanding their background, their work experience, their interest in Hunt Club, and just their generally what they've accomplished. And then the next 30 minutes is like taking it way back from when they were junior high or grade school, and what decisions did they make? Do they have brothers and sisters or family members? What were their interests before pursuing a job or a career? How do they spend their free time and their weekends? What was their greatest accomplishment outside of anything professional? And so you can kind of either from like looking it back empirically as to like when they were younger and the different decisions they made and how they pursued different things to like later on in life, the choices they make from work, you can start to triangulate on like, okay, this person, was a world-class pianist in like 8th grade and then realized that they actually had a deeper passion for volleyball and dropped that for sports and actually accomplished quite a bit, but then had to practically make the decision to go to college where sports was over. And so you can use those sort of breadcrumbs to identify, like, did this person actually commit and give their all to something at some point in their life? And we find that, like, or I find that if they have at some point, they know what it's like to go all in on something. And you can really apply that to building a business together. So that's how we do it here. And we found it to be really effective in the types of people that we bring on Hunt Club's team. And hopefully our customers can kind of feel that in the experience as well.
So let's shift now maybe to your customers and their hiring. What what do you coach? When I have hired execs in my career, um, I feel like, as a CEO, you're looking for the person who checks literally every single box. You have this perfect candidate, and you're like, I want the person who has this, knows my industry, has done this at my stage, has is local to me. Is it? How do you work with CEOs when you're working on finding leaders? How do you have them go through the process of balancing that out, stack ranking it? How do you, because that, I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges, as you're hiring, you kind of looking for this perfect person. How do you coach CEOs, through that?
Yeah, you could kind of look at it across two different slices. So the first is, I love the framework of, I don't know if you've ever heard of this one, but forming, storming, or norming,
Yeah,
and the
yeah, I like
maturity
that.
of
Yeah.
either your business or your function. So, right, like at Better Cloud, you could have had a like really well set up enterprise sales team that was maturing as a team. The 90% of your business came from a sales led motion. And that team like had one or two, three layers of management at that point, right? And like is really effective. And then you might have had like a one or two person marketing team and still very much forming, figuring out what channels to drive demand. And both those teams require totally different levels of seniority, experience, domain
Mm,
expertise, and
mm,
specialization. And so I think that the thing we do with our customers and clients to like how really help them evaluate whether they need a sort of really seasoned veteran or professional that has deep domain expertise across whatever is needed, whether it's management or whether it's industry understanding, et cetera, is really work with them to truly understand, is this a fully formed function where we are iterating and just tweaking the dials here and there? Or is this something that's going to grow like crazy? And so therefore, if the org changes three times in 12, 24 months, 36 months, like you need a leader that's got a totally different skill set and motor than someone that's really good at optimizing a situation. And so I think from evaluating the stage of the function, the stage of the business, you can really get informed on like what are the prioritization of the things you might need, right? And so I'd argue, in an earlier stage of the business, like if someone's passionate and curious, you probably don't need industry expertise as much as you need someone willing to work incredibly hard, be disciplined in learning the business, and then be a bit more of a Swiss Army knife across all the things they might do. When you get to a more mature scale or size of the business, management expertise, organizational structure expertise, leading team, leadership skills, building strategic plans for growth, communicating up really well, communicating down, right? It starts to flex different muscles that are important to a business. And so by identifying the business stage and the maturity of the function, I think it gives you at least the breadcrumbs to start mapping what you should prioritize and what you should leave behind.
that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let me shift now. I want to talk about fundraising because I think you've been quite successful fundraising for Hunt Club, and but I would say it's a market. It's not a pure software company, right? And so
Yeah.
but you have amazing investors. You've been able to raise a lot. Like, why did you do that? Why did you fundraise? Why was that something that you thought made sense for the business?
Yeah, yeah. And so Hunt Club's had three really different journeys in 8 years. So the first 2 or 3 years, the business was self-funded and bootstrapped and profitable. And so slower growth, really trying to figure out product market fit. But the industry of recruiting has a pretty strong business model. So you are able to self-fund it for a certain period of time, in which we felt always the problem in our space was, and certainly in trying to like change this industry, is that most people that came at it from purely a technologist angle didn't really understand what it was like to be a day in the life of an executive recruiter or recruiter. And so we actually felt like we had the technology side down pretty well because we had the crew that started this business had built a couple of different things together, marketplaces, software businesses, et cetera. And so we were like, we know how to build software. What we don't know is like, what are true, like all the complexities around a client service experience and search. And so we actually bootstrapped the business to start, build some lighter technology, and just really worked on the craft of recruiting. And then we hit this tipping point where we're like, okay, we're a couple $1 million business and we see these angles that we really want to go build against more aggressively than if you're lightly capitalized or bootstrapped. So we actually raised friends and family for and a bunch of great serial entrepreneurs, customers, investors, and family offices. But we raised a smaller amount of money for 2 or 3 years and we're really lightly capitalized. And then I think eventually we just hit this tipping point where we knew what we wanted to build. We felt like we understood the industry and the problems quite well. And we knew that there was kind of a unique moment in time where we can really get a head start and go after some of the innovation in the space to truly create an impact and drive disruption longer term. And that's when we went out and raised institutional capital and brought in some great partners to help us build the longer term vision. And the tipping point, David, was really just a frustration of speed where it wasn't for, going to do the TechCrunch announcement. It wasn't for really the vanity of like the capital that we raised. It was just, I would wake up daily for a quarter and just be really frustrated that we didn't have the optionality to move faster against some problems that we felt we had a pretty high probability of being able to solve with more resourcing. And that's what made us go do it. And
Well, it's a pretty big, like from day one to day, raising the big round that you raised and you have the capital now. How did you decide how to allocate that capital? Because that's, you have all this frustration. I know you well, you have a lot of ideas and a lot of different areas that you could go build. How did you choose where to put the capital?
Yeah, I think there are two parts of it. So there's where our customers were taking us. So there are certain areas of business that we heard over and over and over again over kind of 5, 6, 7 years that we felt would be worth exploring. And so one of those areas is Hunt Club actually as a software platform. Now we took kind of our core IP out and we started selling it directly to venture growth equity firms, private equity firms, and now actually some recruiting firms here and there. And our customers really led us to that, where they're like, wow, like we believe in the power of strategic introductions and warm introductions. Everything that we use to manage our own network as a venture growth equity or private equity fund is just insufficient to like getting the answer to who knows this person best quickly. So LinkedIn's terrible for that. Most CRMs don't highlight strength of relationship or like last touch point in a really effective way. And so we felt, we got to a point where we got pulled by our customers. And then the second way that we kind of did it for more so things that power our search experience is we really just charted the end-to-end operational process of our business. So from when you get a customer to when you start a search to when you complete a search, there's probably like 50 steps that come in between all of that, whether it's how contracts flow or inside, how you kick off resourcing, who's going to be working on it, how you find and map your first 150 to 200 candidates, how you reach out to candidates, so on and so forth. And so really we charted that entire process and we actually did an assessment on, okay, if we become the best in the world at figuring out who are the right 150 candidates as fast as possible, how much more leverage would that give our team to do more work, to do higher quality work, and also focus on the parts of the job that they love, and like what does that actually sort of create as an output for the business longer term? Where a search consultant now can do, I don't know, 2 to 3 more searches on a quarterly basis than they might if they didn't have the software driving it. And our customers, our NPS scores and our CSAT scores should go up by X percentage points based on the quality of that experience. And that gave us some framing on how we think about like deploying capital towards investing with some conviction that there should be X amount of payback and X amount of period of time based on the internal projects that we're sort of resourcing and then building software for a new set of customers using our core IP.
On an ongoing basis going forward, are you following those same? I feel like it's always a challenge to figure. Again, now you have the ideas, but your team has grown and they have ideas. How do you figure out how going on an ongoing basis, how do you invest, and maybe is there a process you use? Is it an annual planning process? Is it a quarterly planning process? Do you reassess every week? I mean, how do you decide how to make investments in the business, just as a broad statement? How do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's both an annual and a quarterly planning process that we run through. So at the end of the year, we'll get together sort of in December and look at how we track towards what we said we would do last year. And then we start sort of a general product roadmap process and or headcount process where here are the targets for next year. Here's generally the required resourcing that we need in order to maintain or keep up with the experience that we want to drive for our customers, the growth that we have coming. And then we set from that point on, then set a foundation of, okay, like here's the headcount that we need in sales. If you want to grow 120% year over year, here's the budgetary we need for marketing for the things that we know are working, that we have like pretty high conviction. A dollar in becomes $2 out,
Mm-hmm.
$2 out. And then here's sort of a test budget that we need to allocate to make sure that we can find like the next growth lever for the business and at least create a little bit of experimentation around different channels and different motions to help drive more scalable growth to the business as we go. And then it's around really then alignment around the priorities of the business and how we're going to resource against those, both on the product and engineering side. And so there's always a thesis on, we'll be doing A, B, and C at this point that should drive E and F leverage the business, and that's how we're going to invest. And that's like the academic way that we do it. Of course, like as you know, and like as we talk about all the time, something blows all of that up at some point in time, or a big customer opportunity comes that like everyone's got to lean into, and that's the roadmap, or like this company is distressed and we might have a chance to buy it, and like that would 2x revenue, and we've got to go through resourcing at that. Like I think those who do it really well, at least from our customers' perspective, and we try and model some of the best practices that we learned from our customers who I think are excellent at this, is like create a capital allocation plan that has equal parts experimentation, but also is sort of meticulously managed for the things that you have high belief that will create a return. And then always create a little bit of optionality or flexibility in your system if like the big opportunity comes along, or something that you believe can really kind of 10x the business versus simply 1.2 to 2x the business.
Yeah, I think I when you say that with the optionality, I really like that, because I've seen in my own career oscillating back and forth from we're gonna just fly by the seat of our pants basically to we're gonna plan for the year and stay strong on that plan no matter what opportunities come about. And I feel like that point of having these checkpoints, when you say you have annual planning but then the quarterly planning process that leads into that, I feel like having that and having these checkpoints where you can make decisions, make changes, react to opportunities that are in the market. That to me is really that was a big lesson for me. Is you can go through this huge annual planning process, and then something, to your point,
Yeah.
some company shows up and they're a great fit, and you had no plan to acquire them, and it's sitting in front of you. If you're too strict and too stringent on that plan, then you'll never take those opportunities. So I like that, of the leaving that optionality, and at least from a mindset perspective, being open to that.
Yeah, I think that's like what creates great evergreen growing companies, is the discipline to do the one thing really well, but the openness around experimentation, and how you guardrail around that, like create different flows of communication, not to distract the team. How do you keep your Tiger teams focused on and not getting distracted about the core business? Like there's a ton of tough management challenges around that, right? Like I would argue no one does it incredibly well in a sub $100 million environment. But I think just from a culture perspective of, okay, here's the one thing we're going to do really well. And if there are any adjacencies that can supplement that one thing that are a net new thing that can 10 or 100x the business, like we as a team and a culture have to be open to that, right? And I love Bezos's framework around that, where I think he says if there's a 10% chance where you can 100x something, like take that risk all day, every day. Even if it derails the business or distracts the business a little bit, because creating that optionality for the next horizon or the next bigger outcome or bigger boulder to move is, I think, why everyone kind of joins a startup, right? If you're just optimizing smaller gears over and over again, I think that could create an amazing business. But I think, certainly in the sub 20 or $50 million scale, you're still trying to figure out what is it that's going to make you grow to be a category changer or category definer. And I think that requires experimentation and innovation, not just consistency in the same.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next big question, which is, what is the biggest challenge you've ever faced at Hunt Club? Were you able to overcome it, and how?
Oh man, I still have PTSD from this. So the we had and I hate to like be cliche about COVID, but we had like a really fascinating, challenging, hard moment for a couple quarters where we were actually at a point where we were thinking about selling the business. So I was engaged in the M&A process. We signed the letter of intent. We got right to the finish line.
When was this? When was this?
This was in basically it started in September of 2019, the process. Signed sort of the letter in end of December, and then started going through diligence. Yeah. And then the funny part, I just had my first kid, Charlotte. She was born on November 19th. So I was basically parallel pathing being a dad for the first time, potentially, selling the company to a really great strategic acquirer that would have put like a ton of chips on the board or points on the board for everyone involved, and it would have been a great outcome. And also trying to fundraise for the business too. So we had optionality. So we had a couple term sheets that we had lined up as well. And I was just exhausted the end period. I still think I blacked out. I don't remember any of it. But we basically got to this point where we had M&A offer signed, 2 term sheets, and then my first kid. And I was flying around the country and the world just talking to a wide variety of people at this business to understand how the partnership could work. And a week to 2 weeks before the deal was supposed to close, I actually got a text message from their CEO on a Thursday night. And I'll never forget the moment because I remember looking up and seeing it when Tom Hanks got COVID. I think it was in Australia at the time. And I remember seeing that on a TV screen. And then a couple seconds later, I got a text from this business CEO saying, "Hey, we need to talk this weekend."
Oh.
And I just was thinking to myself, oh, shit. And so we spoke. He's like, "Hey, this COVID thing's coming. It's real." They had a big global business, so they were seeing the implications of it in China. And it's coming and it's real. And like, there's no way we can do this deal with you guys in the event that we may have to take some, cost and reduction measures with the team if it impacts the business. And so we went from basically a really great acquisition that everyone would have done quite well and it would have been a great story for shareholders, all shareholders, investors, to 3 or 4 weeks later, because of COVID, we saw 80% of our revenue freeze and drop. So, just for simplicity of math, like if we did and these weren't the actual numbers, but if we did $100,000 in revenue in March of 2020, we would have done 20,000 in April of 2020. God. And so all our customers froze. We had no revenue coming in the door. Like we were all living in our homes, not being allowed to go outside, like ordering Amazon and hoarding toilet paper. Like it was just the weirdest 180, right? So I went from like this high of becoming a father, this high of like almost getting to the finish line of a sales process to, literally within 2 to 3 weeks later, furloughing a third of our company and the deal being stalled or paused. And then going back to all the investors who we had raised term sheets from, them saying we're not deploying any growth stage investments right now until we understand what this is. So kind of had everything set up to nothing really quickly. And we had to, furlough a ton of amazing teammates just because we thought the business wasn't going to be around in 6 to 12 months. And so I would say that was like the most complex challenge, and knock on wood that we ever had to kind of get through and work through. And it was incredibly tough at the time.
I've heard of directly, I've had conversations, I think, with 6 or 7 people that were in that exact position of having an acquisition offer or a fundraising offer or term sheet and it getting pulled, right at that early 2020 period, February 2020. And it's to get that text message from that CEO. You know, everyone remembers those moments because you just know when that comes. You know, and what you have to deal with. But you did obviously you did make it through because you're here and the business has grown so much. How did you make? I mean, after that down, how did you make it out of that?
Yeah, we just got really scrappy. And so, we were really transparent of the why and the how. We ended up cutting. I took our competition down to zero. Like most of our leaders went close to zero in comp. And everyone took a bit of a pay cut. We had to do furloughs. It basically said like, let's batten in the hatches down and just go out and find revenue. And we were signing a lot of like unique deals. Like we were doing a nursing staffing agreement. We had no expertise in staffing nurses for companies in different ways or healthcare systems. And we had a bunch of customers that at funds that had portfolio companies that were particularly in that model. And we called them and said, hey, if you need extra hands, we can help. We had a number of our existing customers structure like really creative deals with us to be supportive for them. We had a couple companies that got like instant tailwinds for COVID that were hiring like crazy that we structured some deals with. And so basically we went from, effectively being 20% of the revenue that we thought we would be from March to April to back on plan and over goal by October and November. And that's where we really started to see a lot of the sort of digital tailwind effects of, the rapid pace of investing from like end of 20 to 21 and 22. And the business got a ton of tailwinds from that. I think the biggest one actually was our model was always been an expert network referral model. So when you work with Hunt Club, you have thousands of business leaders referring on your behalf from all over the country, right? So when we're hiring Better Club's VP of marketing, we have CMOs all over the entire United States who are experts in security and cyber and SaaS all referring for you. But most of the world had yet to adopt to more of a hybrid or a remote environment. And so for the first time, when you lifted the geographical restrictions of like, hey, I'm only hiring somebody in New York and that person has to reload here, to hire me the best person anywhere in the United States, our model was actually way more equipped to satisfy that because we had relationships, over 25,000 experts across the entire country who knew what great looked like and who had great networks. And so I think we got a lot of tailwinds that way because, I was always making a bet in our business at a certain point, work would open up to be hybrid or remote or really best talent anywhere versus best talent in the city. And our model is really geared towards that. And so when COVID actually started to change how we worked, it actually created a lot of tailwinds for the business.
Yeah, that's so. I never really thought about how search pre-COVID. I mean, including myself, I always wanted to hire someone in a specific city, and to go to the office every day and all, and then it really does open up for your business. It really does. It opens up the world, in many ways.
And most search firms really only know the candidate pool that they know in this
right. That are local. That are local.
Yeah. And our model was always designed, well, maybe the best person for Better Cloud CMO search actually sits in LA. And,
right.
You need someone that like actually knows that person to reach out to them because they may have never heard of Better Cloud and it was a $5 million business, right? So we really designed it that way and we got some tailwinds for it. And I think things are starting to recalibrate back a bit where in office is important, hybrid's important, remote's important for certain cultures. But I think the thing that I think the toothpaste out of the tube now is just basically this idea that hire the best person and then figure out how to integrate it into your working system. And I think most people take that approach in executive search now.
Okay, before we transition to more about you, I want to you've got an amazing, very interesting personal background. For Hunt Club, what excites you about the future?
Yeah. I think there are three things that excite me about this business. The first is I deeply believe that the next generation of category winners are going to be AI and or digitally native companies and services. And when you think about what that specifically means, from a SaaS perspective or a software perspective, like the whole world now has built these like really specific like point solution or like vertical solutions for different industries, right? And like, so, 15 years ago, no one had software for landscapers. Now there's like 15 different platforms for it. 20 years ago, no one really had software for construction or project management. Now there's 5,000 different solutions, right? And so I think with AI and I think with the way the world's changing, I think everyone really wants outcomes now. They don't really want another login. Don't really another
Mm,
access point. And so I think the thing that gets me most excited about Hunt Club is with some of the things we're doing with AI, coupled with knowing that we're really building a digitally integrated solution to provide an outcome for our customers. We're one of the first companies that actually is really born in a like sort of technology period to drive real search and real business outcomes for our clients. And I think that's going to be an incredible tailwind environment for a long time where a lot of these larger firms that want to change to use technology more effectively are going to have to figure out 60, 70, 100 plus years of legacy operating systems, legacy thinking, and legacy sort of structure to do it. And I think we have a really unique opportunity to kind of leverage some of the technology and the times now to sort of go out and win a category. So that gets me really excited. The second is we're all reverting back to the most important thing in business, which is trust and relationships.
mm,
For many, many years, people got a tremendous amount of customer acquisition leverage through paid media and cheap Facebook ads. For many years, people have been able to make sort of SDR models at scale work to grow their companies. And it's funny, like we're kind of all going back to the thing that we all used to do, which is like build a relationship, prove value, and then have like some sort of commercial agreement. And our business is like very much geared around that trend where we use these networks, we're building all these great digital tools to figure out who has the best relationship and then power all these workflows that, although are rooted in technology, are actually really rooted in trust and relationships. And so I'd say like those two trends are the most exciting. And I think that the third is just more personal. Whereas I think a lot of founders build businesses over kind of 6, 8, 10 years and start to fatigue because of either the challenges or the problems. And I'm just, I think I'm more excited now than I was when I started the company.
mm.
And I don't know if you ever had this in like the businesses you founded, David, but it's like we're finally at the point where all the things that I put in the first pitch deck are like kind of becoming reality, whether it's like the macro trends in the world or what's possible with technology today versus 8 years ago. And I'm just really excited about the next 10 years because I think if we really do this right, we're already one of the more larger players, at least in differentiated search and network first software. And so I think if we really do it well, I think the next 10 years could really bode for hopefully grabbing a lot of market and traction and hopefully standing out in a category that hasn't changed much.
Yeah, I really like that last piece. I feel that after 10 years, 8 years, 7, 10, whatever the timeline is, you do reach a point where you're like, okay, we finally have a reputation, all these clients that we've worked with. I finally have a team that I trust. I finally have, you take so long actually to get to that point. And to your point, you do almost get this second wind when you finally have that and say we've laid this foundation. Now we can finally start building on top of that. And so I like that a lot. Okay, so let's talk about you. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Glenview, Illinois. It's about 13 miles north of the city of Chicago.
And what did your parents do as you were growing up?
So my dad was a pulmonologist. He was the first in our family to go to college, put himself through medical school, and then started practicing medicine. Then my mom actually was a special ed teacher. So
Hmm.
she taught special ed for probably about 10 years. And so it was great. It was a good family dynamic growing up.
So no real entrepreneurial, kind of influence, let's say, in your upbringing. Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur yourself? Like where did that come from?
It's a good question. So I think there are maybe two or three things that influenced it. So the first was my whole life from 10 years old to 23 was the sport of tennis. So I grew up, basically made a decision at 10 that I was going to try and be the best that I could be at the sport of tennis. I would, every week there was this academy 45 minutes away. I would take a train as an 11-year-old up to Libertyville,
By
Illinois,
yourself?
by myself, get on a train. And there's a second part of the story. This will make more sense in a second. But you probably couldn't do that today's world, but I would do it then. So I'd take a train up there, get off, walk a mile, go practice for 3 hours. My dad would sometimes grab me, or I'd carpool back, or I'd take a train back. And I did that for 7 or 8 years. And really the independence of playing a sport, committing to a sport, trying to be the best that you could absolutely be from such a young age, I think created some discipline where I needed to find something professionally where I could throw my whole self into it and also see sort of the gratification of the progress and the effort that I'm making. And I think one of the challenges I had with corporate America was you're sort of in a box and a structure where regardless of how good you are or the ideas that you might have, it's sometimes difficult to actually drive at a speed or at the types of outcomes that you want to. And that was the thing I love about entrepreneurship is you're kind of only as good as you are that day. And so I think that was a big part of it. And I think the other part about tennis is, I think this is maybe a less spoken part about the sport, but in a draw of let's say US Open, there's 128 people, or any draw of any tournament that you play, there's basically 127 losers and one winner. So only one person is winning the tournament. So I got really good at losing every week and learning what I needed to do to get better and working on that, right? And even if you got to the finals of a big tournament, you still didn't win the tournament. It could have been a great outcome. So being just a perennial loser, I think I craved something where I was getting sort of that instant feedback loop. And I think the only thing that really is being in a startup or founding a business, and you're only as good as you are, and you learn as much as you can as quickly as you can. And there is no bar because you're building it. I love that. And I think the second part was, I don't know how much influence this had, but I've spoken about this before. I lost my mom when I was, 10 or 11. And I think having to be really independent from a young age and travel to these tournaments and figure, I wanted for nothing growing up. My dad is amazing. He's a great father and I love him dearly. And he's been so good to my brother and I, but he was working a really intensive job as a pulmonologist. And I think having to sort of figure out my own way and be independent on, how do I chart the path to college? What school should I go to? How do I figure out how to continue to improve in tennis? How do I make sure my grades stay on track? All those things really kind of create an independence that I think entrepreneurship really scratches that itch.
What was the first job that you had when you finished college? I mean, you played tennis all the way through college, right? I mean, you were playing competitive tennis all the way through college, so you didn't really have any jobs in college, did you? Or
I would hustle tennis lessons at the local park. I would take kids to tournaments. I was always doing kind of oddly entrepreneurial things. I don't know if this is something that puts me in a positive or a negative light, but I was sponsored by Prince in junior tennis. So Prince, they make rackets and clothing. And so they would send me 8 to 10 rackets every year that I could use throughout the year. I was a 13-year-old. I was I don't need 8 rackets. So I would keep 3, eBay 5, and just start making money in different ways.
I love that.
Yeah. And so the first thing I did to make money was basically all my friends who were sponsored or my friends who were playing these national tournaments. I'd go to them and say, hey, send me your extra rackets. I'll sell them for you and send you a check. And so my dad was always wondering, he's like, Nick, your brother asks for money every 2 to 3 weeks. Why don't you ever need anything? And he sort of sat me down. There's a lot of different ways that could have gone, but I was like, Dad, I'm selling tennis rackets on the internet. And so that was the sort of first ways I started making money. My first job, I was actually Northwestern's women's tennis coach, which was fun. It was They're a great team. I had very little to do with this. It was their head coach, this woman named Claire Pollard, is amazing. She's won, you know, 15 or 18 Big Ten championships, a couple indoor national championships, like always annually in the top 10 ish. And I ended up getting a job there. She needed someone to really focus on hitting with their number one player. So they had the number one player in the country, uh, who was great and from Russia. And so she really wanted to hire someone that could really kind of keep up with her. And so my job was to just train her to try and win NCAAs while working with the rest of the team. And so that was actually my first job at a school. And
Whoa,
it's great.
that's great. And how did that get you to where you are today? Like, that from there to today, I know it's a long journey, but um, how'd you go from that to because you started a number of companies? Like, what was the first business you started after that?
Yeah, women's tennis coach to tech entrepreneur don't
Yeah.
really have like a too clear line of correlation. So the first job was women's tennis coach. The first company, actually, it was funny. I started with one of my co-founders in Hub Club. It was called Appliance. And what we did was we basically built a software platform that took student athletes and took alumni of the sports at those universities and built almost like a LinkedIn group where you could message them, you could see what they're doing in their career, you could do a lot of sort of interactional things in a database. And it was built out of this idea that I graduated in 2009. I actually didn't want to stay in tennis, but it was the only job I could get. And I would reach out to every alum from Vanderbilt. I played at Vanderbilt 4 years. Every single athletic alum at Vanderbilt while I was looking for work or someone to give me an opportunity. And all these like really like successful people who played Vanderbilt tennis or other sports there were willing to make time for me because I had
Mm.
played a sport. And so I thought, well, this is a really powerful way for us to like connect alums and current student athletes. So I talked to my co-founder Scott and was like, let's build a software platform around this. So it's really funny. We ended up building it, built the product over like 6 months. He was not an engineer at the time. I had no clue what we were doing, but we sort of product managed and hacked this thing together, got it off the ground. And then once it got off the ground, we got actually Northwestern and Vanderbilt to start paying us a really incremental amount of money monthly for it. And then I took that experience and then I convinced both KPMG and Accenture that, hey, like I may only be a tennis coach with my only actual skill set being hitting a forehand, but I built the product, I built the business, I have paying customers, and I want to be a management consultant. Like, will you take a chance on me? And got 2 job offers and ended up being a consultant after that.
Wow. By the way, does anything exist like that? That it is a good idea. Does anything
Yeah.
exist like that today for these schools, for the
So
athletes?
there are a bunch of things that people are using to kind of do a bit of it. So like LinkedIn groups is one. They all have their own sort of database and CRMs, but nothing really that still does it.
Because a good
So
idea. It's a good
yeah,
idea.
and my pitch was like, hey, you keep hitting all these alums for money, but like money really comes through like relationships and mentorship and trust. Like, what better way to like actually generate more donor dollars than have all your successful alums mentor the next generation of athletes that are playing their
Hmm.
sport?
Hmm.
I thought it was a good pitch, but I was an idiot. Instead of like going out and getting another 200 universities, which would have made way more sense, I went out and used that experience to go
To
get a
get a
job.
job.
And, like, when we realized I liked entrepreneurship way better 2 years into it, so I went back to that.
What at your core, I mean, you've been driving for many years in all the different businesses that you've been in. I've seen the work ethic firsthand. What drives you? What motivates you?
I think at the end of the day, there are 2 things that probably inherently drive, maybe 3 that are kind of at the core of what drives me. So the first is the going back to curiosity. Like, I love entrepreneurship. Like, I truly think it's the highest expression of like, personal achievement to go from like something that's in your head to something you put on paper to like a product that is like haphazardly built to like a customer to like value. Like, it's just like, it's so much fun, right? And like everyone talks about the negatives of it and it's stressful and there's a lot surrounding that too. But at the end of the day, like I think there's a subset of people that are building businesses for the authenticity of just like truly loving the game. And like I put you in that category in spades, David, where it's, you don't need to keep doing things or building businesses. Like, you had so much success over the last 15, 20 years, but like, you love the game and you're a student of the game. And like, I love building companies and, partnering with entrepreneurs, and it's who I am. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think probably deep down in my core, which is maybe why we created Hunt Club, is I really hate letting people down and I really like pleasing people. And, I think that's a huge feeling part of this too, where, every investor we have, every customer we sign up, every teammate that we bring on board, I really don't want to let them down. And I really want to, like, the thing that we shared and the thing that we pitched them on, um, really make sure that it comes to life in a really meaningful way for everyone. Right. And I think that's a big part of it. I don't think a lot of people talk about, is like, you're making all these promises to employees: change your life, change your career, change your payment structure, come join this company, it's all going to work out. Like, to investors, hey, give me tens of millions of dollars so we can recreate a category. To your family, right? Like, hey, honey, like, I'm going to be gone every week for 6 years for a few days, and it's all going to work out one day, and it'll be worth it, right? And I think that's a huge part of it too, where it's these personal promises where you really want to deliver on the thing that you believe you can do, but also the thing you committed to. A lot of other people are supporting it, and God, I'll do anything not to let them down. And so I think that's a huge part of what fuels it as well.
Hmm. You said something there about your wife before you mentioned your daughter. I know you have this growing family. Um, you know, how do you manage that? How do you manage that? I've been in the same boat. So many people are in the same boat. I I think people don't talk about it, frankly, enough,
No.
and I think it's one of the things that's one of it's very hard actually to be an entrepreneur and have a business and have a young family, especially a young family. How have you handled that over the years? How do you and your wife handle that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be cliche, but I think it's all about picking the right partner. And my wife is incredible. She knows who she married. We've known each other since sixth grade, started dating at 24. And she knows how important this part of what I do and professionally, but what I love and I'm passionate about is to me. And it's a huge part of me. And so I think she's just such a supportive partner to start, that allows me to go kind of chase the things that I want to bring to life in the world. But I think that the second part of that question is, like, I think I manage it poorly. Like, I I I don't know anyone that has truly great work-life balance, like, in doing, or is a 10 out of 10 in being a great friend to your friends and your social community, being a great entrepreneur and CEO, being a great, family man or woman, and do all those three things at the highest level of exception. Like, I
And
think,
take care of yourself,
oh
right?
yeah,
I mean,
and
and
take
take
care
care
of
of
yourself.
yourself. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
impossible.
I even forgot about that part. Like, but yeah, I think you can do. One of my investors, I love the guy. He's like one of my largest mentors. He sold two or three companies. He's an investor now. He's just incredibly successful. Um, he says, like, there's like four things that you can kind of juggle, and so it's family, it's health, it's business, and it's friends.
Friends.
And you can only kind of keep three in the air at once. Um, and you got to let one ball drop. And so I think for me, the sad part of the answer is, like, I like have an incredible friend group that I grew up with. I've got amazing friends from all different walks of life and sports. Like, I focus all my energy into my family. I focus all my energy into my business, and I do what I need to do to make sure my body and my mind stay healthy enough to continue to be happy and pursue what we're doing with good energy. And that's that works for us. But yeah, it's really hard.
It's hard. It's hard. Okay. Last question for you. Knowing what you know now, if you could give yourself one piece of advice at the very beginning of your career, what would it be?
I would say I would tell myself that, and I've actually spoke about this before. I think there's a really interesting thing that happens to an entrepreneur or a founder as you build a business, that, like, you learn nothing really is fatal
Hmm.
except for the things that are actually truly fatal. But like, the big things that happen early on in a business when you're a couple people or growing up, it's like, you lose a match, or like in business, your early employee leaves to go somewhere else, or you lose a big customer, or you push something out that's super buggy, and like you lament over these things for weeks, months, sometimes even years, and like you hold on to them. And I think the thing I would tell myself is, if you keep focusing on the big picture stuff and handle the small stuff with grace, you can get to a point where you can build something pretty successful. And I think, one thing that I love is like this framework around speed to resiliency. Whereas like in the early days, if you're an entrepreneur, something bad happens, it like might take your legs out for weeks, and like you can't get back on the horse because you don't know how to emotionally rationalize it or manage it. And then as you have like more and more things happen to you, and you realize like basically it's just a journey of compounding stuff happening that is negative and or positive, you just get faster at getting over like some of the small issues. A key teammate leaves, you know, everyone's got a journey or a path that isn't always like your business. A customer leaves, let's get better and figure out how we can improve upon that way. And so now I think the stuff that used to take me out of whack for weeks or months now is minutes. And I think I would tell myself, focus on the big picture, keep on prioritizing things that are most important. And of course there's gonna be 1,000 things that come your way, but don't sweat them, and feel them, embrace them, don't ignore them, but focus on the big things. Cause at the end of the day, it's, you do a couple of the big things really right. That is good enough to really build something special.
I think that summary, speed to resiliency, is such a good way of describing that attribute. That I when you say that, what goes through my mind is I remember the first person who quit, the first really good person that I ever
Yeah.
worked with at Vocalocity, and they quit. And I think it really, I was upset for, I think, a month. I think
Yeah.
for a month I really thought to myself, like, how could I have lost that person? What am I going to do? What can I do without that they were the only person who could do XYZ, and you really think about, you lose a customer, and it's out of your control, something happens, whatever it is, and it lasts with you for this long period of time. And when you have that, it really slows you down so
Totally.
much, and so I love that speed to resilience. Like, if you can, and I don't know if there's a way to train yourself to be faster at that, or if it's just through the reps and of dealing with it. But I love that line, because I do think that sets people apart, right? If you have to be able to, right? You get the text from the CEO that says we're not going to buy the company, and then you get the text from the investor saying we're not going to invest, and you could attempt to change it. You could be depressed for a year, but those things aren't going to actually help you be successful.
Totally. I don't, to your question, I don't know if you can train it. Like, I think you just need to kind of go through it. Cause I've seen some incredibly smart, successful people at later stages in their life, like start businesses that go through the velocity of issues. And like, even then, like they don't know how to emotionally like grapple with some of the things that happen to you when you're a first time founder or building a business for the first or second time. And so I think it's something that more awareness about it is probably like the answer that can help like expedite it. So if it's something that more entrepreneurs are talking about, we're all more open and vulnerable with like the challenges of building businesses and the challenges of like all the things you go through. I think that at least helps you understand you're not alone. And I think that gives you maybe a glide path to getting there faster than I did, and or
Mhm.
maybe others.
Where can people find you if they want to connect with you? What's the best way to do that? What platform do you prefer? What if they want to find out about Hunt Club? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, yeah. So www.huntclub.com, best way to like learn what we're doing, and just nick@huntclub.com. So if what we're doing resonates with anyone, or if I can ever be helpful, drop me a line, and here to help. And just excited I was with you, David. Really appreciate you having me.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Nick. This was great. I think I love that speed to resiliency. I love the all hands cadence and how you manage that. I love the hiring advice. It was great. So thank you very much, Nick.
No, thank you. And I can say it, you've been an important part in my journey and Hunt Club's journey. So I think entrepreneurs out there are really lucky to have you asking some direct questions and getting some real stuff in the world. So appreciate you.
Thank you, and thank you to the audience. Thank you for listening today. If you've learned something, if you found this interesting, please share this episode. Thank you, Nick. I'm really excited that we had you today. This has been another exciting episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. We'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.